Good morning, everyone, and welcome to American Scouser's Morning Coffee or Tea, presented by Reckless Coffee. It is Wednesday. It's us again. Yeah, Timucin's still on vacation, so if y'all are
Goofing
missing him, then
off.
I'm so sorry. It's still myself and Gordon, 2/3 of the dream team of the mellow midweek crew, but pretty mellow midweek, or isn't it, Gordon? Great news coming in. Obviously, the signings and everything. We've got two signings in. Like, woohoo! Who would have thought? We actually kind of
And
kind of
wasn't
get.
it you that predicted it? They said by the time we pod next, we'll have three signings. You were close.
Was it me?
I'm pretty
I
sure.
was I was pretty negative about it, to be honest. Maybe it was you. Like, I don't know. Like,
Maybe.
this is like the in between podcast. Like, we got the Friday podcast. We'd come up with a lot of, I wouldn't say outlandish, but pretty fun predictions, right? We got the Monday morning podcast, which is, I wouldn't say it's like, I wouldn't say it's like a case of Monday blues, but they pretty much got their own thing going on there. But I'd like to say we're the great in between,
Yeah.
right? And
We are the sandwich.
yeah, we are the sandwich. Sir Z says good morning. Good morning, Sir Z. Matush is here as well. Good morning. It's Chiesa Day. It is absolutely Chiesa Day. Sir Z says Timuchin with the long-term injury. Think he should go on loan when he comes back. He's definitely gonna need that run of games, right, Gordon? When
Oh
he
yeah.
comes back in.
He's gonna get
So
his form back.
right, for sure, for sure. So real quick here, before we get on the news, which is like there's quite a bit to talk about this morning, Gordon. Your thoughts on last weekend's game, 2-0 against Brentford, obviously. Pretty much, I wouldn't say smooth sailing, right? But we didn't exactly have to get to fifth gear in terms of how we managed to deal with that. What are your thoughts on the overall performance? Did you have a specific player in mind that kind of stood out to you, or a specific player in mind that you were kind of disappointed with? What did you think?
Um, honestly, good showing in my opinion.
Mhm.
It's never an easy team to play. It's
Mm,
also they've given us so much trouble in the past. It's a team that last week's pod I said is a team very capable of scoring. I believe both games last year they scored first against us.
right.
And so for us to keep a clean sheet and also not ever go, we didn't go behind. We scored first. I thought in second game of the season, I thought it went really well, and it was a lot better
Mhm.
than the Ipswich game in terms of like the team looked more in cohesion in the first half. They didn't come out slow. You're right; it wasn't super pretty, but there are these glimpses that we keep getting of this passing play where it's just like, wow, this is going to be a fun season to watch. It might be nerve wracking, obviously playing out of the back with a team that's going to press a little bit higher than Brentford did away from home.
Mhm.
But we are going to see some flashes of absolute genius.
For sure, kind of like that almost well worked goal that almost resulted in Salah scoring in the box
Yeah,
after that McAllister layoff. That would have been goal of the season. At least one of the contenders for goal of the season if it came through. And like you said, kind of like this is like the vision. This is like the end game of
yeah.
what Arnie wants, kind of how our team to play. And considering, two games, two clean sheets, didn't concede first. It's very refreshing, isn't it?
That's great.
Like not digging on Klopp, right? I'm sure like this isn't something that he like conceding first is not something that he would deem ideal.
Well, I don't think it
Ideal,
wasn't his
yeah.
game plan. I
It,
don't
it
think.
wasn't his
Right?
game plan for sure, but there seems to be a little bit more, like based on observation, two games in, there seems to be a little bit more security in that back line, a little bit more caution in terms of committing too much players up front. But let me ask you this though: there has been some talk about the Anfield crowd, about how they seem surprisingly muted, I guess, in terms of it being Arnie's first game, kind of getting our boys going for the home opener of the season. What do you make of that? Do you feel like it's just it's just like the group of fans kind of reacting to what's being displayed on the pitch, more of that, something that's overblown, or do you think it's like a genuine cause for concern? I remember bringing this up in the post match as well, so I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, a little overblown on the commentary. I think it's something that they're going to be looking for all
Mhm.
season long. It's a new manager. It's the first manager that we've had in 9 years.
Right.
Um, it is a totally different style of play in terms of like a more, you know, orchestral build-up. Right? It's very measured. It's not the heavy metal rock concert that we're used to. So there is probably flashes of that where we're going to have to get used to the slow build-up.
Mhm.
I don't think they were awful. It's definitely, you know, it's different because I think even like Klopp, there was a couple of instances where like they were, comparing how Klopp would have reacted in this situation where like even sometimes like the aggression on the sidelines was enough to gee the crowd up, right? And get them
Mhm.
going where Klopp, he does a,
Yeah,
this classic look. And we're not going to get that from Arnott. He's
right.
going to sit back. He's going to, basically, like I said, he's the maestro of the orchestra, and
Mhm.
once we get used to that style of play, I don't think we're going to have an issue. And I do think it was a little overblown, but there definitely was like an audible difference. However, "You'll Never Walk Alone" in the beginning was phenomenal.
It was.
He got his song at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think they're gonna be just fine. It's just getting used to a new manager.
For sure, and you can kind of see that in his demeanor whenever we score as well. He reminds me so much of Rafa Benitez, who holds a special place in my heart. First Liverpool manager that was there when I started supporting the club, so I love Rafa to death. Um, in terms of how when we score, Arnie's just fist pumps a little bit, like no jumping around. It's just like very calm, very collected. And this is the kind of demeanor that we're gonna expect, I guess, going in. As you mentioned, 9 years with the same guy. Anything new, anything changes is like a big
Mhm.
change,
Yeah.
right? So, Alan's in the house. Good morning, Alan, and Timucin is in the house. How are you doing, man? We were just talking about you, of course. Mathieu said it's not heavy metal anymore; it's progressive metal. Very, very, very well put, I would say. Saidu's here. Good day, my friend. And Timuchin says WWKD is strong. What would Klopp do?
Yeah, I think
Exactly.
we're gonna hear that for,
Mhm.
I would imagine, probably all season. It's also something you got to realize that sometimes, especially with a team like Liverpool, who are going to this season control the ball, and it's going to be slow, and it's not going to be, it's going to be these. I compared it in the Discord to like a surgeon, right? Like
Mhm.
the difference is like with Jurgen, it was like a heavy metal rock concert. It seems like under Arne, it's a surgeon alone, like taking that tiny little piece of cancer out of your body,
Mhm.
and it's a long build up and then a flash bang at the end. And so these commentators, they need that. There's empty air, and so they're gonna be bringing it up because it's just something to talk about and fill the
Yeah.
void. So I
Right.
think we're gonna hear a lot of it, unfortunately.
From a strategic standpoint as well, in terms of the players, in terms of conserving their energy, these moments, these lull moments, can actually serve us better
Yeah.
long term in terms of trying to pace ourselves, not trying to go at the opponent's throat like 100% of the time. Because as we know, as good as the Klopp era was, one negative was that we had players dropping like flies at certain points, and maybe these moments where we just recycle the ball, then we just calm down a little bit, will be beneficial for us, in the long term. Cersei says City will go through the same thing when Pep leaves. Yeah, I mean, hopefully they're in League Two by then, right? Like
I
there
think
won't
they'll be
be.
lucky if they're in League Two.
Right, exactly. And before we actually head into like the current news and for the current pieces of news, which is obviously a lot to talk about, let me just bring this up to you, Gordo, because I feel like
Oh
this is the
no, no.
perfect guide. I feel like you see me like shifting through my stuff here.
Yep.
Um, like not to make this the Darwin Nunez show, right? But obviously last weekend, the first time Darwin Nunez came on the pitch. I actually predicted him to score during the first during the pre-match, and then he comes up with this absolute banger from, of course, the golden Twitter account that is out of context.
Yeah.
Liverpool here. So I guess not to put down the guy, of course. I think Darwin Nunez is going to have a part to play, but considering what Arnie asks from his guys, the composure that he needs, and I remember asking this on the post match show. It's Do you feel like Darwin is going to have a really difficult time trying to break in, especially if Jota stays healthy the rest of the year? Because in terms of the build-up play, yeah, he pretty much made some pretty good layoffs here and there, in the build-up play when he came in. But in terms of having to stay disciplined, it seems like that could still be an issue. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was one of these where it's like, it's still the same old Darwin. Hopefully
Right,
he
exactly.
picks something up in training because he hasn't learned it over the summer. That's for sure. Yeah, the fact I don't know. It's that one's a tough one. But yes, I mean if Diaz keeps playing the way he does, because he's had two good games.
Yeah.
Shota's had two good games. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to get in. But I believe it was either the previous our first games build up for the pre-match, or even last week's show, or maybe it was Friday. I watched so many of these American Scouser shows. We put out so many.
Right.
Somebody, it wasn't me, but somebody had said if he earns his way back into,
it's causing. It's causing.
Yeah, okay. If he earns his way back into the team, good. Like if Arne is going to make him earn his way into the squad, then he deserves to be out there when he gets in there, because right now the current crop of players, it looks good, and it's going to be, if he's still with his head off, it's going to be tough for him to break in.
Absolutely. In terms of Cersei, you're not to put down the guy. Listen, Cersei, this is just, I don't know. I felt like this is just a crime to ignore that freaking offside. The moment it happened, I was just like,
it was one of these.
Right, it was one of these. Matthew says here, I'm hopped up on all the copium. If Gravenberch stays winning the damn league, that is the kind of copium I can hop on, Matthew. Listen, as much not to get on Gravenberch too much, I actually think it wasn't his best performance. Like, he was solid, but not super spectacular. I feel like he kind of got lulled into the physicality of the game, especially midway. During that lull period between the 35th to 45th minute to end the first half, where we kind of took our foot off the gas. We were kind of late on our challenges, late on the press, both him and McAllister, and him especially, because I think he got a yellow. But in terms of him comparing his performances over the first two games to at any point last year, still a massive improvement.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Still a massive improvement. So he's not a traditional six. And for anyone who expects him to be a traditional six, I feel like you're fooling yourselves, and that's an unfair expectation. But in terms of having a decent start, couldn't possibly ask anything else from the guy. Cersei says there can be that genie that we've been missing. Exactly. I feel like that's the layer of his game that he needs to improve. The steal, the ball winning. And if he gets even close to prime genie, then we have a player in our hands, because in terms of the creativity, like, he's miles ahead of Genie already going forward. Like, in terms of what he can do with the ball, it's just what he can do off of it, and in terms of staying disciplined. Yeah, it's positive signs. And he's only 22. I love to say this. He's only 22 years old. A lot of things to look forward to from the guy. Mateusz follows up saying, just need 7 of 10s from all of these guys. Don't need a 9 out of 10 every match. That is true. Because we are better than, I would say, 85 to 90% of the league, Gordon, in terms of like expectation coming to win. If we get like a team with, like, let's say Brentford, I'm not knocking on Brentford, right? But this is like, Brentford is like the representation of majority of the Premier League and the majority of the quality of opposition that we're going to be facing throughout the league, and more performances like that. And I believe it's Cersei who mentioned in the post-match, where if we just get our possession game going, keeping the ball with us, not letting them get the ball, it's pretty much a guaranteed win every single game. Right.
Yeah. You show up, and like Mateusz said, like, you get 7s from everybody. The way that we've set up is going to win us a lot of matches. It's suffocating. It's also, the work that you have to do off the ball is always harder than the work you do with the ball. And so the more you pass it around, the more possession you have, the more tired everybody gets. I mean, that Ipswich game was a perfect example. Did not come out to play. Ipswich overwhelmed us, probably just because of the atmosphere. But because it was so difficult for them to continue that full court press, it was, they couldn't sustain that for 90 minutes, and we ended up winning 2-0. So I think we're going to do a lot of that this year. I think the other thing too, like 2 points with the Gravenberch situation and the number 6. We've only seen 2 Premier League matches with this manager, but we might not need a traditional 6. This doesn't seem like a system that really needs a full out defensive-minded 6, which, I would love to have one, especially because, the depth there is not, we really don't have depth in that position. So I think we do need somebody else, but we could probably, if Gravenberch stays healthy, if he continues to put performances in like that, we should see some progress. The other thing is, it's a new manager. I think we're kind of getting this this glaze because the whole team has looked like they've adopted to the system so quickly. I think we're forgetting, like, these guys are still learning this system, right? Like,
and these are Klopp's players.
Yes, yeah. So, and some of these guys have been around for a little bit under Klopp too. So it's like the changing of the mindset and the mentality. I think we're going to see a lot of that, where, like you said, Gravenberch kind of went off the boil for a little bit. It's just like, sometimes when you're in the heat of the battle, especially
Mhm.
when it's physical and you're a
Mhm.
physical player, you can kind of get dragged into those and
Mhm.
forget that, oh, I actually don't need to be pushing that high. I have to step back and do this instead of like getting sucked into it. So I
Mhm.
think we'll see that the learning curves, but man, it's been phenomenal to watch how quickly this team has taken to this strategy.
Right, and for sure, the biggest test that's going to come in is this upcoming weekend. Like, it's good that we can do it against some of the smaller time opposition, but the real baseline is going to be against the Arsenals, the Manchester Cities, and I would even say the Manchester Uniteds, because even though they are clearly at a period where they're not at their best, they always raise their game against us. So it's going to be interesting to see how we're going to adapt against a team that's going to probably be up for it 200% raucous crowd.
Mm-hmm.
That I feel like that's Arnie's first genuine test. Matoush says here it looks like they're genuinely enjoying playing the game. That always helps the style of play. Yes, that is for sure. It helps as well that it's like a fresh start for everyone, so everyone's kind of there to buy in and everything, right? So like they have no reason to kind of go like, nah, I don't want to do this thing, right?
It's college basketball, right?
Right.
They're trying on both
right, they're
sides of the
trying
ball.
for sure. Real quick before we head off to the transfer news, Luis Diaz has created more chances from open play than any other player in the Premier League so far this season. Proving me wrong here, as I came into this year saying that Gakpo would probably be our starting left wing, but in terms of what Diaz has shown, barring that miss against Ipswich Town, it's pretty much vintage Diaz, isn't it, Gordon? Like live wire threat every time he's on the ball. And, that finish, I would admit, I didn't expect him to finish that on the break against Brentford when Jota released him with that really good pass. But we get more of this Luis Diaz throughout the season, then we're probably cooking,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I think we talk about all the time was just he was used so much, and last year because we just didn't have the options, and he's a type of player that once he gets the ball, he like goes at you, and it's the way that he plays is very tiring, and so oftentimes like his 8th game in a row, you were seeing this thing where he'd take 3 players on, and then by the time it was time for him to pick his head up and either pass or shoot, he was so tired his legs just gave out, and he'd shoot kind of like that Ipswich finish, right? Like the run and everything, and it finishes with like what we saw all year from Diaz was just like a poor finish to a nice move. And like you said, Jota releases him so early. I thought we were going to see the same, where like he uses all his energy to run to get to goal, and then doesn't place the shot. But so if we see more of that clinicality, and it may be that system of like he doesn't have to be the guy that we're just like give it to Diaz, he'll go all the way up, and he'll either shoot it or pass it to somebody, and he's kind of being less utilized. I am also a little. It's surprising that it wasn't Gakpo, because I thought Gakpo would fit better in the system after watching what we saw in preseason. But man, the 2 performances we've seen from Diaz, and again, it's just 2 performances, but it's going to be hard for Gakpo to get in, which is good. That's what we want, right? That's
Right.
why we'll talk about the signing we just made right now, but that's why there's 6 forwards, because there has to be that competition. And when the lineups come out, we'll know that it's the best 3 on that week of training, and that's as fans, that's all we can ask for.
Right, and to your point about Diaz, like exerting all of his, finishing off all his energy, like I feel like Gakpo is going to be a dedicated left winger now. So in terms of having to rotate the guy, we have a genuine like pseudo world-class option as a replacement in Gakpo there. So in terms of him having to burn him out this season, we there is absolutely no need. Like if we like play in the Champions League midweek, we can play Diaz, and then the weekend against supposedly inferior opposition, we can play Gakpo and not lose too much from it. So this is a great segue into that attacking depth that we just mentioned in terms of assigning people. This is rare. Second one actually, but the first one that's actually eligible to play this season. From Paul Joyce, of course. I didn't want to quote Fabrizio just out of spite here. Chiesa is now on his way to Liverpool for the medical fee. Agreed £10 million, Gordon, plus 2.5 billion in add-ons. That's 12.5 million.
We bought him in the spillover from the Solanke sale to
exactly.
Tottenham. I mean, that is unbelievable. I mean, these are the kind of signings I feel like we all thought we'd make. I mean, he went to, what was it, Juventus for, 52 million pounds a few years ago. So this is a guy that he gets one injury and suddenly we can whittle it down to to 10 million. I mean, that's phenomenal business.
Right. When we brought in Edwards, when we brought in Hughes, and we hyped them up for their, transfer market acumen, this is like what we expected in a nutshell. Just a great player brought in for like peanuts.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, this is nothing. This is
Right.
We're going to move Tyler Morton.
Right, exactly.
That's what it looks like. Is we're driving the bargain up to Bayer Leverkusen. It just came out that we rejected their bid. I mean, we're going to sell Tyler Morton for more than we just bought. Basically,
sure.
The best player on the Italian national team when they won the Euros in 2020. I mean, he was the guy on that team, and so this is phenomenal. I mean, he's still in his, what is he, 26, right? 26 years old.
Which I was surprised with, by the way. I thought like we were linked to this guy forever. And he's only 26. Like I expected him to be like late 20s or even early 30s. Like we were linked to him, I believe the season we went for the quad or something, right? And I was like, wait a minute, like this guy's only 26. Like I don't know. It's just really surprising in terms of this player's probably approaching his prime, right? He's proven Champions League level talent. It's delivered multiple times in Juventus and can pretty much play across any position on that forward line, which is pretty much the ideal signing here. Alan says cheap transfer fee, so I guess he's 150K plus per week, which is, I guess, for a Champions League level winger, Gordon, that's pretty much standard fees, right? Standard wages per week. Obviously, it's a lot of money compared to what we make every but
I'd love to make that. I'd love to make that a year.
For sure. So Alan follows up with: is Chiesa a slot choice or an FSG choice? What do you think?
That's a tough one because we really don't know. We don't know how much say that Arne Slot has in this, and we know that was one of the contention points between this administration and Jurgen was the amount of say over the transfers. I'm sure there's a say in some sense, but was this somebody that he had highlighted? I don't know. He is a very we've already seen it. He's a hands-on. He likes to be preferred to be a coach because he's very hands-on with everybody. So maybe he is the guy that's pulling the strings on choices. I'm sure he also has a team behind him that does kind of some of those statistics and some of that scouting. So that's hard to say. I think it's still too early in this group's time together that we really know for sure how much sway that either party has over decisions.
For sure. Matush with a pretty midway answer here, monitoring him for a few years, so I'd say half and half. I would say so too. Although I would be a little bit more partial to the FSG part because it really seems like a signing in their ballpark, pun intended. Cheap player, nice. Fits in within the Moneyball strategy, and pretty much bang for your buck signing, but no one's complaining, right? 12.5 million, like let's just get him right before they change their mind, kind of deal, right? Before they go like, hold on, 12.5 million, we're being scammed here. Let's make it like 20 or something. Like let's just get him.
Yeah.
Ryan is here. Hey boys, busy making beer, but gotta make time for. I'm not crazy about the signing. Nice. We appreciate you, Ryan, of course. Forever, he's always here at the Wednesday podcast. I'm not crazy about the signing. For the price, it's a no-brainer. I'll be happy when we get that CB-LB hybrid. Yeah, like to play devil's advocate here, Gordon, and because Timucin's not here, I have to do it. And as you guys can see, I'm not a good fit for the devil's advocate role. But in terms of a need, an outright need for our squad, looking at our squad top to bottom, unfortunately, Chiesa isn't exactly like if you're going to be ranking a priority, he's clearly third in terms of getting another CB or a holding midfielder or even a backup left back.
Yeah, I don't think this is one of these smoke and mirror signings where it's like, shut up, fan base. I think like we still know that we do need that defensive center mid. We do need a replacement for Robbo as he's aging. And obviously his performances, I think that still has a lot to do with injury. I still think he has a big part to play on this team. I think once he gets fully fit, but we're starting to see the cracks, and so it's always better to have the option. So I don't think anyone is disillusioned with the fact that we still need those positions. I don't think this is one of that kind of will, like I said, shut up the fan base. And if you go back to all of our shows, this one, the Monday, the Friday, even the night shows, if you go back a month ago, we were all talking about like which forward is leaving. right? Because there's like, wow, we have an abundance of forwards. So who's on their way out? So this was kind of like not one that I think anybody thought we'd make. But again, like Ryan said, it's a no-brainer for that price. Why would you not do this?
Right. It's kind of like a few years ago, I believe, when we brought in Thiago. Like, he was injury prone, right? He was we had like genuine concerns bringing him in. Would he be able to play enough games? But I think it was like for 25 billion for a world-class midfielder like Thiago Alcantara. Like, we have to hop on that really quickly. And on that note, the injury-prone note, there have been some concerns, Gordon, about Chase's injury history. Although looking into it, I believe it was sort of like pulled into one season specifically, and he managed to stay healthy over the last like 2 years or so. So does that worry you at all?
Only because it is that the knee ligaments, which always seem to either cause constant problems or it starts to affect the other knee because your body just starts to favor one knee over the other. And the amount of time that he was out, it was like 9.5 months, right? So it's almost an entire season that he's out, and that was January of 2020. So it's still relatively fresh. However, I think in this system where we're not seeing like the full out, like attackers need to attack and not stop until they basically collapse at 90 minutes. I think it would be okay. And obviously it all depends on the player. It depends on the training regimen. And medicine is getting a whole lot better. Like we were talking last time about Virgil van Dijk and just his return from a knee injury. And it doesn't look like it's affected him too badly. I'm really surprised by how quickly he's bounced back. A knee injury is not what it used to be in terms of, that drop and play and even sometimes career-ending injury. And the fact that he has stayed healthy since his return from that knee injury just bodes well. I think he played 37 matches last year for Juventus, that's a lot from a player that does have a knee injury. So keeping my fingers crossed. It's always a worry when you buy somebody, whether or not they have an injury-prone history. It's always a worry that you bring somebody in and they spend most of the time in the physio room.
For sure. But in terms of looking at the depth, he's not exactly going to be well. I would assume he's playing right wing, and there's no way he's going to be playing like 90% of games like Mo Salah would. Like probably in the cups, maybe some rotation in the Champions League. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Ryan says he had one bad injury a couple of years ago. Take a chance at 15 million or whatever. For sure. Alan says, John, you're doing a great job. Thank you, Alan. That makes me feel better. I just want a great backup and replacement for Robbo, says Ryan. Yeah, pretty much. Probably, I was hoping that FSG, or rather Edwards, would nail this kind of two birds with one stone kind of deal by getting a CB/left back hybrid. Because if we're looking at Robertson, in terms of like, not to make this about Manchester City, a great analogy is when they actually replaced Cancelo with, I think, Ake or Akanji on that left side for Manchester City, where you essentially don't necessarily lose the progressiveness of Cancelo. Like you lose a bit, but then it's still pretty serviceable, but then you keep that defensive steel in possession on that left side. So probably a center back left back hybrid would be best as that Robbo replacement, Gordon, in terms of this new style. What do you think?
Well, you've got to make, like, a few Wednesdays ago, I had made the point that like these players are aging anyways, right? And so you have to put the piece in, right? Like with the Cancelo thing, the Ake is not. Thanks. Yeah, Ake is not the same as Cancelo, but you need to put that position in. You need to fill that space of somebody, like you said, that's serviceable,
right?
And then go on and find your guy in the transfer window. Because the other thing is, you cannot get a like for like replacement of somebody like Virgil van Dijk when they're not going to play. They're not going to sign with you, because that's part of the thing. The best players want to play the minutes, and so they're not.
I'm sorry, Gordon. I have
to. No, but they're not going to sign your position. So you need to have somebody come in and do the job until you can basically fill that position when the player's ready to leave, and you can provide somebody of world-class quality those minutes.
But then you wouldn't be surprised as well if Robertson manages to pick up the pieces and kind of get on and have a great season as well, because he is that kind of player where, he'll struggle a little bit, but then he has that desire, has that work rate to get better. So still backing him. But then in terms of what Ryan mentioned, we still have to be safe here, because we're not going to We're not seeing Simic as first choice anytime soon, unfortunately. And it's a new system that's less reliant on the fullbacks. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting with how many? 3 more days, right? 3 more days until the window ends.
2, because right now it's like almost it's
Yeah, it's
nighttime
almost
basically.
midday.
So.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of that, unnecessary attacking. I wouldn't say unnecessary because it's always good to have options. So this is our attacking depth right now.
Here we are going like this might be too many, and meanwhile Chelsea's got they had to build like an addition to their locker room for all the players they have.
Right, like there's like 8 goalkeepers, I believe, like 8 or 9 goalkeepers. Like, oh my gosh! But looking at this graphic here, we obviously have our first choice attack: Diaz, Jota, and Salah, who's performed well these 2 games. But that backup front 3 would pretty much be the front 3 of every single team out of the top 4. Like Chiesa, Nunez, Gakpo. You could do a lot worse with that, Gordon, and it just pretty much speaks to, I guess, in terms of bias, right? In terms of a position that we love to prioritize, even during the Klopp era, it's kind of been attack, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's good to see because that's always been, over the last 9 years, that's how we've developed as a club. We're an exciting club to watch. Even like neutrals will always say they love watching this team unless they're playing them. And so to continue to have all these options and forward and basically you're guaranteed a goal with these 6, right? You are guaranteed a goal. Mm-hmm. And you have to, I don't know, it's you got to, in order to win games, you have to score, and this is a great 6 to have if that's the key to the game. So I love it.
Not to play, well, I have to play devil's advocate because Timucin is not here. Obviously, we have our first choice right now: Diaz, Jota, Salah, but putting form on the back seat. Right, if you were gonna pick your outright best front 3 who among these group of players, like let's say we're going up against Manchester City, big game. It's a game we have to win to, let's say, seal the title, right? Like, who would you go for among these group of attackers?
Based on what we've seen, or just like their whole careers with Liverpool?
Yeah,
or
based
just
on what we've seen,
games?
I guess. But then that's just 2 games plus preseason, and based on how you feel like they'd fit into the system after, let's say, a good run of games. Like, let's think long term here.
Yeah.
Which do you think would adjust the best to Arnie's system? And in terms of like our best side, all things considered, who would you think would lead that front 3?
No, Diaz has been doing well. It's one of these things where like the top 3 there, Diaz, Jota, and Salah, have been playing well. So that's who I choose based on those last 2 games. I still do feel like Gakpo probably fits the system a little bit better. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether it's like he's not shown it in training, or if it's just like Arne is the guy, the person that he is in training is like Diaz is the guy that started, so he has to lose that position. You have to beat him to get that position. It's kind of like a competition thing, and Gakpo will eventually take that place. I think I'd probably do Gakpo, Jota, Salah just because of Gakpo's height. He's a little bit more physical, so I'd probably switch that. But in terms of the last 2 games, if we're playing Man City at the weekend, those are the 3 that you go.
For sure. Sparky goes your Diaz, Nunez, Mo. And kind of like we mentioned earlier in the podcast, if Nunez manages to worm his way into that starting, it means he did something really great, considering that Arnie doesn't have any emotional attachment to these players. So long term, you'd hope Nunez manages to break in because he's the younger player compared to Jota. He's got a lot more going for him physically. He's taller, faster,
less injury prone.
Yeah, less injury prone as well. So, long term, I do hope Sparky's predicted front 3 here does come to fruition, but we will see. We will see indeed. Personally, I'm going to go. Ryan says here, I think Diaz has to lose his position is the thing. True.
Yeah,
well, so far, yeah, that's the truth here. You can't pretty much, aside from that Ipswich miss. Sorry, got kind of jumbled there. You kind of can't really fault anything from his performance. Pretty much what you would expect from a left winger in terms of creating the threat there, providing an option there out wide. So made me eat my words because I did
like
really.
Like you said with earlier with this stat. I mean, he's created the most chances in the Premier League out of anybody. So you got to have that guy in your starting lineup. You'd be a fool not to at this point.
And I did touch on it earlier, Gordon, but do you feel like Chess is locked in on that right wing? Because that's where I assume he's going to be playing. But then what I assume and what Arnie's going to do is completely different stratospheres, right? So how do you see him in this attacking lineup?
That's where his strongest with Juventus. He's played on both wings for Juventus. He actually last year he was in the front two. So and that was they were rotating the whole time. So it's like you said, what Arne wants to do is what Arne wants to do, and we'll learn that. Right now, I don't think we know enough about him to see where he's going to put it. But when you look at the six, that's the like for like switch, because Gakpo is not going to. He's not going to go to the right. He could play the right, but he's less effective there because he does like to cut in and shoot on his right foot. Diaz is definitely a left winger. So I think in terms of if you've got two players in each position, he's definitely right-sided winger.
I would think so too. Tim says here that does this shift Gakpo possibly to Dom's role? Gakpo at the 10. How do you feel about that, Gordon? I personally feel, before you go in, like we've pretty much tried to shoehorn Gakpo in multiple positions too much last year. So I feel like we just have to play him at his dedicated position. But what do you think about that?
So I have always said, just having watched this sport for as long as I have, his physicality, his size, his ability to play with his back to goal, it makes me want to shove him into that position, right? Like he just seems like that classic old school 90s English like center forward, and like playing right off the shoulder, to the ability to like take the play and kind of move it forward with his back to goal or facing goal. He just has that ability and the skill with his feet. Every time he goes into the center, though, he just disappears from the game. I don't think we've seen a good performance from him unless he's been on that left side. And so I don't know, maybe it's like he strikes me as like, I keep going to these basketball analogies because I know you like it so much, but like, the 7 footers that can hit the threes, right? They don't make any sense. You want to put them under the basket, but if they're going to be shooting threes, then keep them out on the wings. So that's how I feel about Gakpo. His structure would fit the number 10, but I haven't seen a good performance from him.
For sure, and he's kind of most dangerous cutting into that powerful right foot of his. Like, as we saw towards the end of the game, he unleashed an absolute rocket of a shot. Like, that is his most dangerous kind of sequence, and he doesn't do that coming in central. Like with central, I mean, not to like kind of dumb down his role on the left wing, but in terms of what he has to do there's kind of less options for him, which makes his role easier in terms of either try and cut in or try and find the fullback or just recycle the ball. Whereas if he's central, he kind of has a lot to think about, whether it's a straight left, straight right, go on for himself, or take the shot. I don't know. I feel like sometimes simplifying roles for these players makes it infinitely better for them. Timucin says here, unless we sell Diaz, he's not playing much at the moment. But then with the Champions League and the Cups coming up, like, you would say that he would probably have a chance to start every other game, especially we go midweek, like with the Champions League, with the League Cup coming up. So if we're going deep into those four competitions, Gordon, we might actually see some adequate game time for Gakpo.
Here's the other thing too that we're not used to as a fan base, or we haven't been used to, is Arne will be the manager. It already looks like that's going to move pieces for different games. Where like Jurgen was always like starting 11, like he would switch to starting 11s all the time, but he was very much like this is like sort of stubborn in his substitutions. And it looks like Arne is the kind of guy that like, oh, this isn't working, I'm going to switch this here. So we could see this situation of these 6 guys just constantly rotating when needs are what they may be against different teams. So I think he does get a lot of starting minutes. And like you said, the cups and competitions with the current squad depth, especially like in the midfield, I think we're going to see a lot of rotation for early cup games at least.
It makes me feel so much better that we could start against a lower tier League 2 or League 1 side, and we have Chiesa, Nunez, and Gakpo as our starting front three. Like, compared to years past where, no disrespect, of course, cult heroes Divock Origi, like Shaq towards the end of his career, and Minamino, who was always too lightweight. Like, that is just an upgrade right there. Too much, the players with supreme potential and quite a ways to go. Ryan says here, I'm loving Gravenberg so far. No, I'm shocked too. I've been telling you, Ryan. I've been telling you since last year, just give the boy a chance. He's not my answer to the 6. Yes, well, he's not a 6, right? But he has played very well so far. Yeah, and kind of what like Gordon said earlier in the show, Ryan, I don't think we're actually looking for a traditional 6 at this point. Like we're kind of looking for guys who can do both roles, not necessarily specialist six, but who can do it all, right? Who can progress the ball, who can kind of disrupt play from time to time. So
that's why like I was a little hesitant when we first announced Subamendi because we hadn't seen a Premier League game under Arne. And now that I've seen this team in 2 games, man, he would have been a great fit for that role. Every game that we watch, I'm a little more like sad that he liked his mountains and his what was the dish that he liked? That is the PowerPoint presentation.
Right, for sure. Sparky says we haven't played anyone yet. Yes, but you can absolutely start worse. Right. Yeah. Like in terms of these are the type of oppositions that Gravenberg couldn't even play well against last year. So
I'm thinking, what was it? 2020 was it Leeds 3, Liverpool 4? Like that's we've played down the competition before.
Yeah, we played down. Timucin bring back Thiago. Someone on the Discord says that a games played basis will pay him at a games played basis. I don't know. I think that was Thiago. I think that was Joel Matip. That Joel Matip shout though did kind of make my ears ring a little bit because in terms of 4th choice CB, like someone who came off a big injury, but pretty much in his prime would be a hand and glove fit to Artie's system, right? Yeah, I don't know. Like we'll see. There's still 2.5 days left in the window, as you said. Don't think Gravenberg is that guy. I'm cautiously optimistic too, Ryan. Like Sparky said, we haven't really played anyone of supreme significance yet, but you can start worse, right? There are worse ways to start.
If you would have asked us at this point last year if McAllister was going to be the 6 all year, I think everyone would have laughed at you too.
Yeah.
So there's a chance, and like he performed admirably. He's not the best 6. He's definitely way better for us, and utilizes his talents better higher up the pitch. So I think that there's an argument to say that like sometimes history doesn't always dictate how we feel. So Gravenberch may continue to be in that role. I mean, I definitely would not have thought at this point last year that McAllister was going to be utilized that deep all year.
Oh, yeah. And if you told me at the start of the year that our starting holding midfielders would be McAllister, okay, that's acceptable. And his partner would be Gravenberch?
Yeah.
I would just be like, I'm the biggest Gravenberch guy here on this channel, but I would be like, wait, what? What did he do? Like, did he take something or whatever? But yeah, listen, like, well, long may it continue, right? Because if Gravenberch gets better, the whole team gets better.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, that's pretty much a great way to end that conversation. But if we're going in terms of another signing that's unfortunately not going to be appearing for us until next year, at least if I'm not mistaken, 25-26. That's next year, right? That's next year. Yeah. So okay. We finally managed to get him in. Mamardashvili, subject to work permit and international clearance, announced by the club, with Valencia goalkeeper set to move Anfield at the end of the 2025-2026 season. Between this, Gordon, and Allison's comments last week, I don't know if you caught that. And he spoke with Paul Joyce, of all people. So in terms of legitimacy, it doesn't get any higher than that. In terms of a goalie who wants to stay and fight for his place at the club. I can't believe I'm saying stay and fight for his place. And we're talking about Alisson Becker, who's our best goalkeeper probably since like, I think Ray Clements, right? Like way before my time. I haven't personally seen him play, but when I speak with older Liverpool fans, that's who they say, right? He's probably at Alisson's level. It's just insane to think that we're already thinking about a long-term successor for him. But then at the same time, like you mentioned a few shows ago, this is like planning for the future. This is smart, as Ryan says. So where are you with that? Like, are you still like in that camp where like, okay, this is the right thing to do, but then Alisson comes in and throws a wrench into the spanner and goes like, yeah, I want to play with this club many, many years. I want to fulfill my contract and possibly extend. So how does that make you feel?
I mean, that is music to my ears because it's competition, right? I want the best. The best 2 goalkeepers. I don't give a shit about any of the other clubs. I'd rather have the 2 best goalkeepers in the world fighting for a position. Can you imagine? I mean, that's the issue with that Brazilian national team is, oh my God, who do you play? Do you play Ederson? Do you play Alisson? Like, I would love that problem at Liverpool, and I would love that every time that one of those guys puts on the gloves and gets between the posts, it's the best guy from that week. And so, like, imagine having one of those guys as your alternate. Like it's phenomenal. I love it as a fan, and it's good to hear from Alisson too, because that's also what you want to hear. You got a guy with an expiring contract that's given us so much, that could probably go anywhere he wants in the world. He's like, I want to come here. I don't care about the money. I want to come here. I want to fight for my position. You'd love to hear that as a fan. That's the kind of thing that I think sometimes we think that all the players love that about Liverpool because we love Liverpool that way. And you don't always get it. It's more of a business side. I think like when Mane moved, it kind of hurt a lot of people the way that he went. And so like to hear this from Alisson, it's great. It's great. I love it. And also this bit of business with him going back to Valencia for the year to loan. I mean, that's great too, because he's not going to get any minutes or enough minutes. And you want him to continue to be at that high level that we saw from him for the last few years. So I think it's all around. I couldn't be happier with that piece.
Timucin says Saudi money incoming for Alisson. He did say that he rejected an offer going to Saudi, but then him rejecting an offer, Gordon, is different from maybe the club thinking that transfer fee is probably too enticing, right? Like, let's say if Alisson doesn't want to move there, but then Saudi offers 90 million, right, for probably a goalkeeper that's, although goalkeepers have a longer ass shelf life, right?
Yes.
He's 31, and that's still incredibly young, especially since like I was a goalkeeper and I wasn't really a good one, but I would say that I'm somewhat knowledgeable about the position in terms of how he plays the position. It's very sustainable in terms of how he saves shots. He's not necessarily that flashy David De Gea kind of do like that acrobatic, almost somersault save. He's just always in position. So in terms of him saving shots, being in the right place, being in the right spot, it's pretty much good for his career long term. So it's quite interesting. It's a very interesting situation. Ryan says here, I would love Georgie to be our backup next year. That's like, I don't know. Like, would he be our backup? Maybe he'd be starting, as you mentioned, Gordon. It's a great luxury to have.
Yeah.
Like, would he even be our backup? He's good enough to be our first choice. But then Alisson has sort of that credit in the bank going for him.
And he's much better with his feet, which seems like what Arne needs this team to do.
Exactly.
So, that's the only downside, I think, to Mashmadali is that he doesn't play well with his feet. He gets a little flustered when you watch him. So hopefully he can correct that this year. Maybe they'll give him like these are the goals you need to hit by the end of the year in order to come over. Because there was also talk about it being a 2-year loan. So who knows? I mean, like I said, Alisson's at the age too where they could just do a 1-year extension. But like you said too, I mean, goalkeepers can play well into their 30s if they're at the high level, and I think he is. However, on the other side, like talking about the Brazilian national team, I'm like, you're seeing a little bit of those cracks from Ederson starting to his play is starting to go down a little bit too.
Yeah.
So you want to have these players in the backup, which is what I was saying last week, and you alluded to earlier when we started talking about this transfer was. You need to make these moves so that when the time comes, nobody wants to admit that Mo Salah is going to start depleting, right? He's reached the peak. The only way is to go down. He's not going to get any better. And so you don't like to admit it, but you need to have these players behind him so that when those cracks start to show, we can keep Mo Salah and play him sparingly as his career starts to dwindle instead of being like, oh crap, what do we do?
Yeah.
We have nobody to replace him. So I think it's a great move.
Same goes for Virgil as well. Still playing at a high level, decent first 2 games from him, but he's already plateaued and nowhere to go but down, as you say. So surprising that in terms of the spine of our team, it's goalkeeper that we went for first, right?
Yeah. I think another shock, right?
Right.
But I think we thought we were going to have Zubimendi, and this was, when that one fell through, and then all of a sudden we announced this one, everyone's like, well, that's not what I thought, but I think this one was in the works for a little bit longer and just kind of the timing was off. But another one that I was like, wow, I didn't think we'd go for a keeper, but I'm glad we did. That's a good move.
Yeah. Alan says you're planning for the future. What does that say about Keller and Pitaluga? I think it's saying what everyone thinks it's saying, Alan. They're probably gone. It's a shame about Keller as well, because I don't know, before the Giorgio links, I probably pegged him as to be the successor, but then the club doesn't see him that way. I guess, Gordon. It's just a shame. Great servant of the club, but as we all talk about in the Discord, right? Business is business, unfortunately.
Yeah, and he's been talking a lot about wanting those to move, and he thinks he can make that next step up to regular team football. Yeah. And as on a human level, you want that for him because I think he is good enough to start in most of the teams in the Premier League and be the starting keeper. And there's plenty of keepers right now. There's plenty of teams that are looking for that replacement to move in. So I think he's got the options, and you want him to move forward and you want him to have a good career because you don't want him to be like a Scott Carson, right? Where it's like great talisman for every club that he's played for, good solid backup, but doesn't ever get the minutes. He's just basically a journeyman. I think Kelleher is better than that, and I think he does deserve it. However, you keep Kelleher too. You've got 3 potential starting keepers. But these are like the wonderful options to have.
Yeah, we're challenging Chelsea for that goalkeeper title, right? How many do they have? 10, right? Like I think it was the Wednesday show or the Monday show that was surprised that Kepa was still in the books for Chelsea. I don't know if it was us or it was the Monday show, but that's hilarious. Sparky says here it's about time Trent puts the pen to paper. Yeah, I would say the only downside of this window, like we're managing to get signings in. Right, but they're not necessarily the signings we need in terms of Mamardashvili and Chiesa, but at least we're bringing people in to strengthen the squad. But in terms of fortifying the positions that we've already established, it's a little bit intriguing in terms of how the club is approaching this.
Yeah, and the more that we see those little, it's going to happen. He's a top player. We've seen it with Mo. We've seen it with Mane. We've seen it with so many players that get pulled before the time goes, and they're just not ready to go out because they were having fun playing. But the more and more that happens and he hasn't signed a contract, it's just going to make the media, it's going to get more agonizing and anxiety driven, because you watch his demeanor on the bench, and when Arne went to go talk to him, and then afterwards he's just kind of like this, and doesn't really, his demeanor was not good, and it exacerbates that when he hasn't signed a new contract and he's ready to go at the end of the year. So I'm hoping that they just correct that issue and just wipe that off the table.
Yeah, and that clip with Jota trying to cheer him up, and then people were saying he was just talking to Trent about FIFA or some shit. Yeah. Trent wasn't having it one bit. But what do you make of that, Gordon? It's obviously, you mentioned that it wasn't good, but do you feel like it's being overblown a little bit because of that situation? It's just a player who just came off, who isn't happy to be coming off. Simple as that. They'll hash it out in the locker room kind of deal.
Oh, definitely. It's not a good image. It's also like, there's a bunch of cameras on you. It doesn't matter. You sneeze the wrong way, someone's going to catch it on camera. And he is a top player. He's not used to coming off. He is the top guy. He was having fun. Everyone looked like they were having a good time against Brentford. So it's a competitive reaction. He is a little bit older now, that you hope that he doesn't do that and keeps that internal, and then goes in the locker room and says, hey, I really wasn't happy that you pulled me off, instead of looking like he's 21 and 22 and pissed off. But again, it's solely because of that contract and the expiration and the contract looming over his head. That stuff, and the more that it keeps happening, because Arne seems like someone who's going to pull these players off to protect them when we look like the game's in the pocket.
Right.
And the more and more we see that, the harder that's going to be for him. And we like to think these guys are in a glass box after the game, and they can't access media, and they don't have friends that text them. The media affects these guys' decisions too. And so I hope that they put it to bed one way or another quickly.
Sparky says Arnie said sign or he'll sit. Bradley will play. Maybe. I mean, that's a good theory to put there. Bradley is a surprisingly hard done. As good as Trent is, and we predicted towards the start of the season that regardless of his fitness, Trent will be starting that right back. Bradley is still a pretty much legitimate option, had a really good preseason as well, so you could do a lot worse for a backup right back, and he's still very young. Which is, as you mentioned, the strength and depth is definitely something that we're not going to take for granted. Nick says here, just take Klopp back, he can play as DM. Yeah, I guess. I mean, listen, in terms of trying to disassociate Arnie from Klopp, which is what we're really trying to do here, it's not going to help, isn't it? If you actually bring the gentleman back in any capacity. Ryan says here, I think Slot or any manager would be okay with players getting pissed about being sub. Yeah, as long as you don't let it fester, I guess, and try and clarify as to why you're being subbed. Obviously, the thinking, of course, and I think Arnie mentioned it during his press conference, that obviously we've got a game next week against United. The game is one big game next week. If Trent has a problem with that, then that's a pretty different conversation in terms of having a very logical explanation and then still having a really bad problem with it. I think that's when things can maybe go south. But then in terms of how Arnie communicates, he seems like a very well-spoken guy in terms of being clear to our players. I feel like it's something that's been hashed out in the locker room. Real quick here, Gordon. I don't know if you're a kit guy, right? Like, because I like half of my wardrobe is filled out with Liverpool kits,
Yeah.
which I regret. Like at this point, I just bought the new home kit last weekend, but the new third kit is out. And it looks good, with the exception of that Nike logo, which I don't understand why.
I looked it up.
Yeah.
So it's to signal, and I don't know why it's that direction and why it's like that, but the thought behind it from Nike is the advancement of the women's game. Don't ask me why they decided to switch logo for that, but that's from Nike.
Yeah, but great cause, I guess. But then it's a little off, like in terms of like having a if you're gonna make a statement, I don't know, like anyway, like in terms of the trim, the design, the colorway, what do you think of it? I think it's pretty good. I like the cream color to it. Sparky says sales gimmick, I guess, right? Like to an extent, but colors, Gordo, what do you think? Would it be something that you're gonna spend an arm and a limb for, though?
Like the same with the home kit. It's the collar. I have like this is gonna be weird to say in public with all these people watching, but I have a sensitive neck. I don't like. I have a thick neck for a human being of my size, so I don't like this. I'm very particular about how things touch my neck and go around my neck. So that one, I don't know. I'm not a fan of the home kits collar. I'm not sure. I'd like to see that one a little closer, them wearing it, because that could just be like just the coloring around it. It might not be the collar, but yeah, it's a decent kit.
Yeah, my hot take is like I'm a fan of the home kit's collar, which is why I ended up spending an arm and a leg for it. But to each his own. And the good thing about these kits is that there's a lot of variety. Although I'm not a fan of when I started supporting Liverpool, we had one home kit for 3 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Then they started changing it to have a new home kit every year. I was like, why? Because obviously that hurts the budget, right? That hurts in terms of resources and all that. So Ryan says here, I hate actual colors on kits. I like that 18-19 kit. I don't know if you remember that kit, Gordon. When Van Dijk won Player of the Year.
Yep. I love that one. That one's fine. Like a polo is fine with me. It's that like real scratchy, almost corduroy collar of the home kit that I'm not. That one just bothers me.
Oh, it's scratchy.
I don't know. It looks like.
If it was scratchy, I would have pulled back. But I guess I'll find out. Right?
I might be slightly autistic with the like the feelings, but like when I look at it, it itches my neck just looking at the collar.
Sparky says waiting for the Adidas kit next year. See, I was thinking about that too. I was like, should I get this year's home kit because I like how it looks, or should I just wait for the Adidas kit next year? I ended up biting the bullet, but it remains to be seen how Adidas is going to be looking.
Because it could be crap, right? It could be a crap kit.
Did you have a preference for brands, Gordon? Because I know you've been around the block in terms of supporting the club. Did you have a preference in terms of like our kit sponsor, like our kit outfitter?
Like I like the New Balance just because like every time they dropped, it was like fresh. It was different than all the other kits like out there. Whereas like Nike kind of recycles these like through the leagues. Even like sometimes I think it was Barcelona and Tottenham. Like one of the warm-ups was the identical like away kit or third kit. It was like weird. So I don't like that with the bigger brands. There's not a whole lot of spontaneity, whereas like New Balance, it seemed like, hey, we added this because of this in the city, and like, oh, this is for like Albert Docks, and this is this, and it's like seemed like it was very tailored to the club, which I liked a lot. So the New Balance, I think, has been my favorite, and also there's something about like when you look at a kit and you remember the season and you remember like a specific goal or a specific game, and like New Balance just it was part of the height of our time with Jurgen, and so I think that has a little bit to do with it as well.
I was about to say, like, I judge kit based on how we perform on them. Like I like the design.
Okay, Alex Ferguson.
Right. I like the design and stuff on it, but then in terms of like looking at that 18-19 kit where we won the Champions League, which is my personal all-time favorite kit, that 18-19 kit with the collar.
Yeah.
That and the new and the one that came out the season after, I believe.
With the yellow liverbird.
Right, the yellow liverbird and the pinstripes. Those are my personal favorites of all time. But it helped a lot that we won the Champions League and the league in successive seasons.
Yes.
Right. So I agree with Sparky. Oh, sorry. That was Samantha saying ew, but I think you know why she said ew there, Gordo. Sparky says your New Balance best kid in the last 20 years. And I agree 100%. Granted, I haven't been supporting Liverpool for 20 years. So Alan says this is one season I probably won't purchase a jersey. I just like them. Plus, Gordo, I don't like certain jerseys, which is fair enough. Let's see what Adidas has in store next year. But real quick, Gordon. So we talked about the transfer window ending in 2.5 days, right? So let's say we brought in Chiesa, we signed Mamardashvili, and that's all we do, right? That's all we do. How would you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10?
5, because we need players. We also got a number of older players on small contracts. We don't want them to walk for free. We also don't have replacements for them if they do walk. And the fact that we haven't re-signed any of them, or even there's no hint that either any of them have any offers on the table for a new contract, that's not good. And obviously the Chiesa is a great pickup, but I don't think it's one that anyone circled as a need.
Yeah.
I think so. The only reason I would give it a 5 is because that goalkeeper, that's a good piece of business. We got an older player with an aging contract, and we bring in a high level target, and he's kind of put him in the pocket for the future. He gets all his minutes this year as first string goalkeeper for Valencia, and then he comes in and does the job for us next year. So that's why I'd give it a 5. Otherwise, it's been, if we don't bring in one of the pieces we need or sign any of these guys, that's a rough one, because we lost a lot of youth that we thought would be pieces this season that aren't even at the club anymore.
For sure. Sparky says 3. I'm going to go in between you and Sparky and say 4 for me. And Alan says your FSG did buy a couple of kids from Chelsea and Wolves, but in the grand scheme of things, are they actually going to play a single second of this season? I guess not. Right. But let's sweeten the deal here. Let's say at some point towards the end of the year, we give Virgil and Trent, maybe, let's say Virgil and Trent, new contracts, bump it up from a 5, you would say? Granted, that doesn't happen this transfer window, right? But would you feel better, I guess, with this window if at some point towards the end of the year we give Trent and Virgil new contracts?
Yeah, as long as it's sustainable for the club, because you still need those roles to be filled when they're gone, because they cannot play forever. And so as long as it makes sense, financial sense for the club, I'd probably give it maybe 1 or 2 extra points, for the simple fact that it'll take a lot of pressure off of us media-wise this year without having those pieces, because you're still going to have to buy next year. And the other thing is with clubs, when they're selling players and they know you need a position, they're coming to the transfer table at a much more aggressive stance. We know you need them, so instead of it being 25 million, we're going to ask for 35, 40 million. 40. So they come from a place of strength, which I don't like at all. So you need to be smart, knowing that eventually you're going to need to replace those guys.
Right, fingers crossed. Like you said, 2.5 days. As is American Scouser tradition, right? We try and end the show on a prediction. So let me actually go with 3 things for you here, Gordon. First one is, do we make a signing towards the end of the transfer window? One more signing from after Chiesa and Mamardashvili. What is your prediction for that?
Yeah, seeing how we were 2 weeks ago and then having these 2 guys in the pocket, and it sounds like we're still kind of sniffing around for certain positions. Yes, I do think we've moved for somebody.
Sparky says here no, which is where I am at, actually. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong, but I just have this really bad feeling inside of me that we're going to go with the usual spiel. We didn't find the player that we wanted, right? There wasn't enough of what we feel like we'd actually go hell-bent for. And I don't know. Maybe that's something that's going to be detrimental. Maybe we'll escape. Right, maybe we'll sort of hold the line until January. Who knows? Second thing, no change for the starting lineup against Man United for you. Same 11.
Yeah, same 11.
Same for me as well. Kanate, in terms of coming in, doing what he has to do, really great. For me personally, he was my man of the match, and he will be needed against United, trying to win those balls in and sort of establish our possession. And finally, score prediction for the United game this coming weekend.
I mean, if you got to be a betting man, you go with Trent. So I'm going to say 2-0. Trent hits a free kick, and all is forgiven from last week. He's the town hero again.
For sure. Ryan says there will be one more move. Positive prediction. That is great. So Alan says press that like button now, please. Yes.
The thing
Press
too with like this administration, well, I call it administration, but this
it's almost election season. I get you.
That was not the right terminology. This back office is like they're highlighting players that we don't even. I mean, Chiesa, I don't think anyone saw this guy on a radar. So like you never know what's going on behind the scenes because they're going to pull somebody we didn't even assume was even available on the market. So I think that's what gives me hope.
Right. It's great that they're keeping with that Liverpool tradition that Sparky always mentioned, that we're doing a lot behind the scenes that we don't even know of until it kind of comes in. And we're hoping for a Fabinho / Diogo Jota kind of signing that just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah,
right? And to be fair, Chiesa was sort of that. Right. We were just linked to him like 3 days ago, and now the deal is like 99% done. So finally, I don't want to bombard you with predictions here, Sparky, because Sparky said a 1-1 here. And I did ask this towards the end of the post-match show last weekend. Would you take a draw if it was offered to you right now?
Away from home, third game of the season, new manager at Old Trafford, after how up United played for both of the second half of the season games against us, yes, I would take a draw.
Would take a draw. I want to lean on that as well. I would take a draw, but I would expect us to win 2-1. And for the record, I believe Sir Z, Brian, and Kazi all said no. They would not take a draw. And Kazi said we would win handily as well. So that's the positivity for you. But getting the housekeeping out of the way, if you guys aren't subscribed, please do. We're at 875 subscribers here on YouTube. We're also on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. And we're also on TikTok. So please go to those platforms, like us there. Every like is appreciated. We're trying to get to 1,000 at the end of the year. So all of those likes would be appreciated. But in terms of the Wednesday show, this is it for us. We appreciate everyone joining us. Alan, Sparky, Ryan, all those guys, Sir Z. It's been a pleasure sort of subbing for Timucin here because I believe he's going to be back next week. So it's gonna be the original front three here. So yeah, we really enjoyed sort of subbing in here. But Gordon, appreciate you guys. Appreciate you joining me as always. And there will be, I believe, a Thursday podcast tomorrow night, so tune in for that, joining Brian, Maka, Trevor, and the boys there. But if there's nothing else, we will
fantasy show. There should be a fantasy show,
right? Will be a fantasy show, and which I am massively surprised that my team is doing okay. By the way, everyone laughed when I brought Gravenberg in my team. He hasn't. He's given me a total of 5 points for the first 2 match weeks, which isn't a good amount, by the way. But like, listen, he's still
better than 2.
Yeah, he's giving me something. It's better than 2, so there is that. But yeah, fantasy praise aside, we appreciate you guys joining us, and we will see you guys next week. Take care, everyone.